We finished drawing the front elevation and the section view of our door, but before we can really call this a piece of drafting, we need to add a few more things. A title block, a border, labels, and dimensions. Now there are tools in the dimension tool set that you can use to make a reusable title block, but we're just going to keep it simple and use the drawing tools that you're already familiar with. Let's start with the border. That's simply a fine line that surrounds our drawing. Remember a few videos back when we set up the page, we created a layer that was 16.5 by 10.5, so we've already accounted for the margin that most printers will need. So let's simply use our old friend, the rectangle tool, to draw a box around the drawing. I'll select the rectangle tool and just snap to the page corners. I'll start with the top left and just click on the opposite corner down in the bottom right. Now, obviously we have a white fill in our rectangle, so simply find your attributes palette and switch from solid fill to none. We could also use the Control-B command to send it to the back of the drawing, but that might be annoying later on as we could easily accidentally select the border if we leave the fill in. So setting the fill to none is the better choice. Now, just to make it a bit easier to see the border, with it still selected, find the Offset tool and head up to the mode bar and switch from the duplicate mode to the Offset original mode, as we just want to change the size of the border, not make a copy of it. Set the offset distance to 1 inch. 1, just type in 1. Now remember that we're drawing on the design layer in this example here, and so we're still in the 1 inch to the foot scale. So shrinking the border by 1 inch in scale, we'll just move it a tiny bit, like 3/32 of an inch in real world scale on the paper. But this way we can see the border inset from the edge of the page, and we'll make sure that the printer or the PDF can draw the whole border. So if you haven't already, just click in the inside of the border to shrink it that tiny bit. Next, we'll just use the rectangle and the line tools to draw a simple title block. Title blocks can come in all shapes and orientations. Sometimes they're along the right edge or along the bottom edge of the sheet, but even with a basic rectangle title block, you'll still want it anchored to the lower right corner of the drawing. This way it makes it really easy to flip through a set of drawings and find a particular plate, just like page numbers in the corner of a book. So start from the lower right corner of the border and draw a rectangle that is -4 foot, so -4'6". -4'6" in the X and +1'6" in the Y. So that's 1'6" in the Y. And then remember, we're drawing in 1 inch scale, so our title block on the paper will be 4.5 inches long by 1.5 inches high. Now, starting from the same corner, draw a -1 foot by +1 foot square in the corner to serve as our sheet number. All right, now we're going to use the line tool and snap a straight line from the top left corner of the square to the left side of the rectangle. Just look for all those screen hints, horizontal and all that. Find the center hint on the vertical edge of the square, and then just snap another straight horizontal line to the title block's left side. And now find the text tool. Or you can hit the 1 exclamation key on your keyboard. And then we're going to click into the top field of the title block and just give it a project name. You could say Vectorworks Tutorial. Remember to use all caps when you type that out. The text tool is the one tool where you can't use the X keyboard shortcut as you type. You're just going to hit an X into your text. So this time I'll give you permission to go up and reach up to the basic tool sets and click on the button for the selection tool. If you need, you can drag the text to center it into your title block. And with that text selected, notice that you have all of the basic word processor type tools in the object info. Feel free to change the font size or anything else you want. Okay, now I'm too lazy to use the text tool twice again, so with the selection tool active, I'm going to hold down the Control or Command key and click and drag out 2 more copies, and then line them up with the other fields in the title block. And remember, you can do that little Control drag trick on any kind of objects in Vectorworks. Now, to edit the text, I can simply double-click on a text object, and it will automatically switch to the text tool. I'm going to Control or Command A to select all of the text in the text object, and just type in door elevation in all caps in that middle field. And now in the bottom text object, I want to type in scale 1 inch equals 1 foot dash 0 inches. So we want to just show that we are in a 1 inch scale in there. Now find the text tool again and click into the square and type the number 1. Now click on the select button again, and with the 1 selected, change its font size in the object info to something like 72. By default, there's a white fill behind the text in Vectorworks, so to keep that white fill from covering up our title block lines, go into the attributes palettes and set the number 1's fill from solid to none. Now this is an extremely simplified title block. Usually there's a lot more information in here, but this will do for now. You can always customize it to your own needs in the future. Use the selection tool to drag a marquee around the door elevation and the section and try to center them in the drawing. We drew them kind of a little close to the left-hand side of the paper here, so let's just give us a little bit more room by centering it in there. You can also push it fairly close to the top of the page because we want to add some dimensions at the bottom down over here. Now, directly under the front view of the door, use the text tool again and just add a label that says Door Front View, all caps again. And then use the select tool or the nudge buttons. This is a great place where you can use the nudge buttons because it doesn't really matter. It's just kind of making it look nice. And eyeball it to center below the door. And then leave a decent gap below the door because we do want to fit those dimension lines in. Now use the text tool or the click drag trick again and pull out another title under the section and name it Section View. And then keep it nice and horizontally aligned. You want to make sure that with your dimensions or your labels or whatever, that they're not all crooked and going every which way. That's going to make your plate easier to read and just look nicer. And now we need to add some dimensions to the drawing so our carpenters will know how to build this door flat. Now there's a whole set of dimension tools in a special tool set, but the dimension tool itself is also found in the basic tool set. So let me show you how it works. I'm going to just draw a quick rectangle off to the side to demonstrate. Now I'm going to find the constrained linear dimension tool in the basic tool sets. Don't worry about that long name. It's just kind of like the default dimension tool. It looks like a dimension line, or maybe it looks like a football goal. You just find that over there. There are two, one that's straight and one that is diagonal. And they're very similar, but make sure you select the horizontal one. You can also use the N hotkey. N for, now I'm going to use dimensions. It takes 3 clicks to set a dimension, so just watch me the first time. First, I'm going to click on the top corner of the rectangle, then I'm just going to move the cursor, no dragging, I'm just going to move the cursor away from my first click. And I'm going to click once more down here. I'm going to hover over the corner until I see the screen hit for the bottom corner, and then I'll click again. So now I've set the length of the measurement, but I still need to place the actual dimension line on the drawing. So I'm going to push my cursor away from the object and see how I'm getting that preview there. This way I can decide how far from the object I want the dimension line. And when I click a third time, I place the line and I finish the operation. So again, it's click once on one of the points you want to measure, and then click a second time on the other side of the measurement. And lastly, trombone out the line until you like the offset and click again. Now, I'm going to delete my example and head back to our door flat. And we know the height of the flat is 8 foot 0 inches, so that'll be a good one to start with, make sure we're doing it right. So remember, all of the snapping is possible because these 6 snapping settings are on, especially this third one, snap to object, that's the one that's doing most of the work. They are very helpful, but this snap to object is essential to get these precise measurements. If you have these turned off, you're just kind of getting close. You have to zoom right in. You could be off by like a whole half inch or something like that. So make sure that you've got these snapping to object turned on, and then it's really fast and easy to do this. So zoom in or out with your scroll wheel until you can see the whole height of the door flat. Now you can zoom and pan in the middle of setting a dimension, but it's just easier if you don't have to do that while you're starting. So make sure you can see the top and bottom of the door. With the dimension tool selected, click on the top left corner of the flat and then move your cursor to the lower left corner and click when you see the screen hint bottom left. Now move your cursor to the left a bit and click a third time to complete. If your line says 8 foot 0 inches, then congratulations, you did it right. If not, zoom into the corners and see maybe you missed or something. Just select X and delete the dimension line and try again if it didn't work, but it probably did. So hit the X key for the selection tool and notice that you can select the dimension line and move it back and forth to reset the offset at any time. That happens all the time. You add a dimension and you come back thinking like, oh, I should probably add another nested dimension in here. Let me scoot this back a little bit. It's very easy to do. I'm going to move mine back further so that we can nest 2 more dimensions in here. It's important in drafting that dimension lines are never crossed. The dimension lines are the lines that actually have the number on them. These little lines are called witness lines or leader lines, and you can have them cross each other. That's fine, but you never want them to cross an actual dimension line with another dimension line or a leader line. Drawings can get extremely confusing if you do. So we're going to do nested dimensions. We're going to put the biggest dimension on the outside and then progressively smaller dimensions kind of tucked in like little Russian nesting dolls or whatever. So let's add a measurement for the bottom of the flat to the top of the trim. I'm going to select the dimension tool again. Remember, you can hit the N key, and I'm going to snap to the bottom left corner this time. Now move the cursor up to the top corner of the trim around the door. So click on the corner when you see that, and push off to the left again. And then click a third time when you're ready to set the dimension. Let's put a third dimension on the left side of the drawing. Hit the X key and select the dimension lines if you need to make more space. Remember, don't grab them by the text field. We'll talk about that at the end here. Just grab them somewhere along the line, and then you can just move them quite easily. With the dimension tool, click on that same bottom left. I'm going to have make a mistake so I can show you how to fix it. On the second click, snap to the corner of the door panel. It should read 6 foot 4 inches, and then move to the left to set the dimension. Now, there's nothing wrong with this dimension line. It's not a very useful measurement. I might want to know what the size of the panel is, but we aren't measuring that. We're measuring it way down to the bottom of the door. So a more useful measurement might be the overall height of the door. But we can fix that easily. Hit your X key again to get the selection tool, and then just select the dimension line. Notice that when you're in the interactive scaling mode, which you probably should be, that's the default mode, that there are 2 blue control points at the end of the leader lines. So zoom in to the top left corner and click and drag on the little blue square and just snap it to the top of the door. So click when you like the new snap. Now the dimension line should read 6 foot 8. That's the height of the door. So it's very easy to re-snap a dimension line even after you've drawn it. So let me show you another cool mode of the dimension tool. Select the dimension tool and then select the second mode. This is the chain mode. And this works just the same as the basic mode, but it lets you set a whole string of dimensions. Let's use it to measure all the things at the bottom of the door. I'll start by clicking once on the same bottom left corner, and then I'll move sideways here, and I'll snap and click on the left side of the door trim. Just like before, I'll back away from the object, and this time I'm just going to move the cursor below the door and click to set the offset. But we're not done. We're in chain mode, so I can keep on going and snapping onto other objects in here. So I'll snap to the other side of the trim, and then I can measure the width of the door. I can go over here and click on the width of the door, the other side of the trim. And now I want one more, the distance from the trim to the end of the flat. So this time I'm going to double click on that last corner to set that last dimension, but also to tell it that we're done. Stop adding dimensions. And look, we just added 5 dimensions in a few seconds. Now use that same mode and start up at the top right of the flat and snap all 6 of the dimensions we still have to add here on the side. So the 6-inch trim at the top, and then down to the top of the door trim, and then the 4-inch thickness of the trim, and next the 4-inch thickness of the door rail, and then all the way down to the bottom of the panel, and finally double click on the bottom right corner of the flat to add that last 4-inch measurement and finish the chain. Isn't that pretty cool? Let's do one more thing so I can show you a few more things that the dimension tool can do. Hit the X key and shift click on the 3 dimensions on the left of the drawing, and then just move them a little bit further away. It's nice that you can move multiple dimensions at the same time for examples just like this. I should probably add the height of the doorknob to the drawing. So once you've made some room, hit the N key or select the dimension tool again. And let's just go back to the standard mode as we only need 1 dimension. Now, one more time, snap to the bottom left corner and then carefully snap to the center point. Look for that screen hint. Snap to the center point of the circle you added for the doorknob. And if you followed me exactly, you should see a dimension of 3 foot and 7/8 of an inch. If yours has something slightly different, don't worry. You can just follow along. Now, 7/8 of an inch is an annoying little fraction for a carpentry kind of thing. So on something like a doorknob, there's no reason to have a tiny 1/8 of an inch on there. So there are 2 ways to fix this. One that's quick, but can get you into trouble if you use it too much. And there's probably a more elegant solution. The second one is better. But let's do the quick and dirty one first. With the dimension line selected, find the object info. And this is a good panel to play around with and see what all these things do. But scroll down right now to the text section and find the field that says precision. See that it's set to 1/8 of an inch by default. For framing carpentry, that's pretty precise. I can just select 1/4 inch from the dropdown, and Vectorworks will round up or down to the next 1/4 inch fraction. In this case, it'll round up the 7/8 to a whole inch, and the new measurement now reads 3 foot 1 inch. It's not actually that measurement, but we're just cheating the text to keep it simple. In this case, it probably would be fine as there are no other dimensions referencing the center of our circle. So I'm showing you this as a bit of a sloppy, fast workaround, but we can actually move the doorknob center to a whole 3 foot and get rid of the 7/8 entirely. That's probably a better choice. So set the precision back to 1/8 of an inch in the object info. And then that hack is, by the way, a per dimension line basis, so it's not changing the precision for all the dimension lines, just the one you have selected if you ever use that cheat in the future. We were careful and snapped to the actual center point of the circle. I can actually now use the dimension tool to move the object. Scroll back up to the length section of the object info, and notice that just like our rectangle from the earlier videos, we have these control points here too. A line is just a line, so it only has a start, a middle, and an end. My start control point is already selected, so just like when we used the object info to resize the door a few videos back, we can do the same thing here. Notice the length says 3 foot 0.884. Well, that 0.884 is the 7/8 that we want to get rid of. So all I need to do is to click into the length of this field and backspace to delete the 0.884 so that it reads 3 foot exactly. So when I hit enter, I'm going to get a little help hint pop-up window. I'll explain what this is telling us in a second. For now, just say OK. And notice that the dimension now reads 3 foot 0 inches. But this isn't a cheat because the dimension was snapped to two control points, the bottom of the flat and the center of the doorknob. The circle actually moved down 7/8 of an inch. So it got rid of the 7/8 and it actually centered the middle of our door at an easier, more carpenter-friendly 3 foot, right? So this only works if both sides of the dimension lines are snapped to something, but that's usually true when you're doing this sort of thing. What that pop-up hint was saying is that you can double-click right on the dimension text and change it right here. I usually like to use the object info this, as I find it a little tricky to click in this little dimension box, but that's just me, so whichever way you like. We've covered a lot in this video, and our drawing is ready to print, but let me show you one more bonus thing about dimension lines that can save you room on your drawings and confusion in the shop. Notice that the dimension text is stacked above or to the left of the dimension line by default. Back when I hand drafted, I always preferred the align dimension that placed the values centered directly on top of the line. Not only does this save a lot of space with nested dimensions, it also eliminates any confusion as to which number goes with which line. You can always just click and move the text on any dimension line. Just be careful of that, by the way. Sometimes that can cause you problems. But that can be very useful if you're in a tight spot or the text is in a weird position. You can just kind of click on it and drag it and scooch around. But that's way too tedious to do for every dimension. So let me show you how to set that up automatically. So select the dimension tool and then find the standards drop down up over here. It's set to arc for architectural by default. If you open up the drop down, you can see that there's a number of different conventions already set up, but none of them place the dimension right on the line like alike. So let's select a custom standards to make our own. In the pop-up, click on new and just name it something, my version or whatever you want to call it. Next, hit the edit. Notice that there are all kinds of default measurements and settings that you can change, but this top left field that's probably already selected, already highlighted, is the only thing I want to change. So simply hit 0 and OK. And what that's doing is it's just going to take the offset to 0, which is going to place it right on the dimension line. All right, so nothing has changed. Now that when I exit out of there, it's like, well, that didn't seem to do anything. Well, first, if we want to use our custom offset from now on, we need to select it from the drop-down in the standard menu. All we did was make a new standard. We haven't selected it yet, so we need to actually select it from the standard. There we go. Now the text is directly on top of the dimension line. Great. But we have a bunch of dimensions. We could just select them all, but that would be a hassle. So instead, let's use the magic wand. Okay, it's called the Select Similar tool, but that's really boring. It's clearly a magic wand, so I like to call it that. By default, it's set up to select similar things. Basically, anything that has its own heading in the object info, like rectangle or circle, line, arc, etc. In this case, dimension line is a heading in the object info. So all we need to do to use this magic wand tool is to click on any one of the dimension lines on the layer, and every dimension line on the layer will be instantly selected. With a dimension line selected, go over here to the object info and pick your custom standard from the drop down, and all of the existing dimensions will be switched to that align style. And now you can hit the X key for the selection tool and tighten up some of those offsets if you want. Down at the bottom, I can now give the dimension a little more room between the drawing title now too. In the next video, that will be much shorter than these last few, I promise, I'll show you how to export your drawing as a PDF. See you then.